Hi everyone, welcome to the CZ Armor channel. Today I won't talk about CZ or a Tanfo, but it's going to be something similar. This is the Sarsilmaz SAR 724 Sport. Here's the model. This has been released, if I'm not mistaken, like a month ago in a SHOT Show in Vegas, so brand new. Out of a very credible source. Sarsilmaz is, if not the oldest, one of the oldest firearms manufacturer out of Europe. They've been up since the 1880s in Turkey. Like, this is the Ottoman Empire time, to give an idea. So very credible source. They know what they're doing. And this is based on a CZ75 platform. So it's going to be interesting to look at it, understand the possibilities, what can be done, what is different from a CZ or more similar to a Tanfo and so on. This is what this video is going to be about. Shout out to Derek from Omega Defense. This is his gun he brought to me with that goal. Like, check it out, see how it works, what can be done, anything that is compatible. Can we do something to this gun that we normally do to Tanfo and CZ, use the same parts, and so on. That's the idea. So here's what this video is not going to be about. I'm not going to do any modification, any improvement parts will be installed or aftermarkets, anything during this video. This video is going to be about just looking at it, getting familiar, find out what the possibilities, maybe build a plan on what can be done, but I won't do it in this video. So that's what YouTube police there. This is basically looking at a gun as is from the factory in a safe and controlled environment. Nothing dangerous being done here. With that said, let's start. All right, let's open the box and see what we got inside. So here she is. We got a single action, double action, steel frame, steel slide, everything steel. Very very similar to what a Shadow2 or a Tanfo stock one would be. And make sure there's nothing here. There's a flag in the chamber, so we know this gun is unloaded, but I want to double check. Take the flag out if I can. There we go. Nothing in the chamber, nothing in the magwell. So this is completely safe to operate and play with it. Sarsilmaz SAR 724 Sport. This comes in 3 different models, and I'm going to put a picture here with the models and the price range on them. They're about $999. You wish it was $499. And for the compact, I think that's the cheapest of the 3. It's $949, and the sport, the full size, both the full size and sport are $999. So the compact obviously is the smallest and lightest of the 3. The full size is about a 4-inch barrel, so more compatible to maybe a CZ Shadow2 compact. And this one, the Sport, is a 4.5-inch barrel. So just on paper, I would say this is more like a Tanfo size than the Shadow2. Shadow2 is a little bit longer with a 4.89-inch barrel. So this is a little bit shorter. Feels slightly lighter too, more like a Tanfo. So we'll see what else we have here. Interesting thing, this is a CZ75 magazine. So that's a Shadow2 magazine pretty much. So magazines compatibility, it's 100% compatible with the Shadow2. I'm going to make sure, bring a Shadow2 magazine here just for the sake of it. So that's a Shadow2 magazine. You can tell this is a MacGar, pretty much, normal Shadow2 magazine. Got to put that in there. Oops. Well, that won't fit because of the magwell. So it needs to be one with the polymer base, not this base that I have here. I've got a regular one with the base that I know it's gonna fit there. All right, let's see if this one with the Henny base pad that is designed for magwell will work. Yeah, there you go. So yep, locks up in the magazine just like normal would do in a Shadow2. So magazine compatible to Shadow2. It comes with 2 mags, it looks like. Yeah, one here in the bag, one was in the gun. A toolbox, another thing pretty similar to Tanfo, same shape even. And I bet it's just like stuff to clean up the gun here. Yep, you have brushes and a cotton patch and stuff and whatnot. So if you're regular maintenance, comes with this kind of a sleeve here, a manual, a token of appreciation. Thank you for getting a SAR 724. Pretty cool. Stuff that nobody used for anything, to lock your gun up if you need to save somewhere, store somewhere. Sticker. All right. So let's take a look and see what we got. some things are, oh, interesting. Let's see what we got here. This is interesting. I think that's actually pretty cool stuff that comes with it. So it comes with, it's a optic ready gun. So this is a plate that you can remove. It won't remove the rear sight though, so you're gonna have a co-witness whether you like it or not. If you don't like it, you need to remove the rear sight. But you get a co-witness with the dot. That's a plate comes off, and then you can put a plate, an adaptable, a plate that is adapted to the optic that you're going to use. Holosun, 3G Con, whatever, Vortex, Sig, whatever is going to be. Interesting enough, it comes with different plates. So the plates are already there. So that's awesome. You don't need to purchase separate plates for it. You got plates for RMR footprint, RMRCC footprint. Don't know exactly what area is, and RMR and RMSC footprint there. So you come with these 3 plates. I didn't see bolts though. Didn't see the screws. So it doesn't come with screws for them, but it comes with this kind of a Allen button head. No, just a flat head Allen that would go here. Is this Allen or Torx? I think these are actually Torx. Yeah, it would make sense to be Torx since the others are Torx. Yeah, these are Torx. However, these are just these bolts for the cover, for the plate cover. These cannot be used. These screws cannot be used with these plates. You're gonna need some that there is. You can tell they're countersink to kind of get this screw flush. So just a heads up, when you got this, you got the plates, which is the hardest thing to get. Screws are easy. You can get that in your hardware store, but you're gonna need to get some 632 screws, countersink head, and it comes also with some Allen wrench and Torx wrench. So pretty cool. That's an advantage. You don't see, I mean, not every gun comes with those plates. CZs won't come, Tanfolios won't come. So you're gonna need to purchase that separately. So all right, we got the grips. I read check, these grips are actually not compatible with a CZ Shadow2 or Tanfolio. Not sure why, don't ask me why, but these are unique grips. They're not. I tried to get a Tanfolio grip panel here, doesn't fit, or a Shadow2 grip panel here, doesn't fit either. So if you don't like these grips, they are kind of too smooth for my taste. They're okay. I like aggressive grips. These are not aggressive. They are okay. They're like, let's say, I'm gonna say from 1 to 5, 5 being the most aggressive thing you can get in the market, 1 being totally smooth. This is like a 2.5. That's what I would say. Not really aggressive. They are kind of a thick, which is good. It's not a palm swell, but they're not flat. You can tell like they're a little bit, well, they are flat, but they are thick. So you get like, it just feels like it would be a more like a small frame Tanfo or a Shadow2 with thicker grip. So you get more real estate here. More on the larger hands, if you will. Like if you have small hands, you're probably going to want to change these panels to something thinner. If Sarsilmaz make available, I haven't checked that. Magwell, that's pretty cool. We got a regular double action, single action trigger with no adjustments. I don't see any kind of a pre-travel or over-travel adjustment. Double action feels smooth. Kind of on the heavy side, not really heavy, but yeah, definitely not a light trigger on the double. You got a little bit of a long reset here, so I can move my finger without resetting, and then it resets. But not bad. Some take up and then breaks pretty good. That's actually a pretty good single action trigger. Smooth, decent double action. I like it. Hammer. This looks like a Tanfolio style hammer rather than a Shadow2. And look into inside to confirm. You got serrations, the back and the front. They are aggressive. They're good serrations. You're not gonna miss. You're not gonna miss the. You're not gonna need more aggressiveness than that. It's pretty good. If you're on the rack by the front or by the rear, it works. Sights come with the regular steel sights, looks like, with just that white dot. I don't think these are front. These are night sights. They're just like this, not nitrogen or anything. It's just really white dots, similar to like a Glock sides, except that these are steel, not plastic. But okay, has a bushing like a Shadow 2 or a Tanfo 1 that doesn't have a bull barrel. It doesn't have a bull barrel. You can tell it's just a straight barrel. What else you should notice here? Safety system, exactly the same as Tanfo or Shadow 2. Up blocks, low release. Not ambi safety, so just on the left side, you would see ambi safety here on the Shadow 2 and the Tanfo. This is just one side. Slide lock, same system as a CZ Shadow 2 or a Tanfo. So this would be to take up, to disassemble. You would take the slide stop out. They have witness marks here on the frame and the slide, and then you make them. Seems the same. Let's see if the same trick that I do in the Shadow 2 works here too. No, it won't. Yeah, you need to line the marks, push the slide stop up. Slide stop looks pretty similar, not exactly the same as a Shadow 2 or a Tanfo slide stop. And then we take it apart to look at inside. Okay, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to bring a Shadow 2 and a Tanfo here and look at side by side in the parts so we can compare things. All right, I got all the cousins together here, all the relatives together. A Shadow 2, a Tanfo. This is a Tanfo stock 2. Unfortunately, I don't have a Tanfo stock 1. I think this is more like a stock 1, similar to a stock 1 than a stock 2. But it's what I have, and the slide is not going to be exactly the same because this is a bull barrel gun versus a street barrel here. But the mechanism, like the architecture, is going to be the same. It's going to be similar, I guess. But the frame, although this is a large frame and this is a small frame, they look, I mean, based on what I can see here already inside, they're going to look pretty similar to each other. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to take the Shadow 2 apart first. Get that slide stop out. I'll put that Shadow 2 slide right next to it. Okay, I need to put a something like that, and then the Tanfo. And we'll see how they look like, how they are similar or not from each other. Okay, so here's what we can see. I'm going to put not right next to the other, but I think it's more similar. All right, Sarsilmaz or SAR slide, Tanfo stock 2 slide, Shadow 2 slide. So you can tell these two are much more similar than they between themselves than they are compared to the Shadow 2. So here's some of the main differences. The Shadow 2 is longer, like I said. That's a 9-inch barrel, so it's a longer slide. This is a 4.5 and a 4.5, so they're about the same size. They're actually exactly the same size, almost exact same size. I think the Tanfo is a little bit longer, a hair longer still than the SAR, but other than that, pretty similar. There is a fine pin block here. There's not a fine pin block here, so that's another difference. The extractor system is exactly the same, but you can tell there's a roll pin. You can tell, but like I suspected this is more like a Tanfo as soon as I got my hands on it, because everything is a roll pin. You see roll pins everywhere. The Shadow does have some roll pins, but a lot of pins are solid pins, like the extractor one that you can see here. That's a solid pin versus what do you have in the SAR? You can tell there's a roll pin right there, and a Tanfo same way as a roll pin as well. But I think the most telling thing here is a fine pin block. You got a fine pin block here and a fine pin block here. The fine pin plate in the back is a little bit different between them, but yeah, same system. This one has a couple holes here in the slide that you don't see in the Tanfo. Interesting. That's for the plate, for the optic plate. You see that here in the Shadow 2 as well. It's kind of an overflow of the optic plate. All right, so this in terms of slide, This is pretty much a Tanfo clone rather than a Shadow2. Although Shadow2 and Tanfo are kind of also based both in the same platform. But okay, let's look into the frame. So it is a SAR, and you can see you got your one-piece sear. That's cool. Not every Tanfo come with that one-piece sear. Some of them comes with the sear, and there's another lifter armor here. Arm, sorry, here for the firing pin block. So the firing pin block lifter arm is on the side. This one is a one-piece, so it's integral. The lifter arm and the sear in one piece. The ejector, and then you got things that are more like, you can tell this is a Tanfolio basically. Trigger bar, pretty similar to a Tanfo as well, which is same system as a Shadow2 as well, but you can tell this is different. It's thinner, kind of a narrower than a Shadow2. And you see, this is one of the main differences here in the Shadow2 and the Tanfo. Right here, what you have here, we call it trigger bar guide, and that's a different design basically than you have in the Shadow2, and I'll show you. The trigger bar guide is what goes underneath the trigger bar and push the trigger bar up, so it resets the trigger. If you look at Tanfolio here, you're going to see the same thing, except of course that this one is already polished, has been worked already. But the polishing this is a good thing, because it's going to take, there's friction between this and the bottom of the trigger bar. So if this is polished, this is smooth, you got a little bit smoother double action trigger. But you can see same narrow trigger bar, same trigger return spring system, which is the same as the Shadow2 too. But that trigger bar guide is right there. It's right there. Same sear. This sear is like, it's it's silver, not black, but it's one piece sear, just like the other ejector in the same place. Hammer is the same system, safety. So pretty much this and this are very, very similar. You can tell. So the SAR so far is really a Tanfolio stock 1. I'm going to say stock 1 because of the straight barrel, and also the trigger is a little bit longer course than you see in the stock 2. But the design, architecture, everything seems to be pretty similar here. All right, I'm going to put the Tanfo, I'm going to get this assembled again, and we're going to start looking to inside of the SAR and start planning on what can we do. Do some measurements, do some control, and then we're going to do a plan, build a plan on what can be done on this gun. Okay, we're going to start doing some measurements. I did measure the weight of it, but before I go there, let me talk about something I forgot. So the SAR has checkering on the back of the grip, front of the grip, and the front of the trigger guard. So it looks great, but it's kind of a wide, bigger checkering than you would see on a Shadow2. Just to compare, here's what the back of the Shadow2 grip looks like, the checkering. So you can tell much bigger, much wider than the Shadow2. So what this makes is the Shadow2 is a lot grippier, a lot more aggressive. There's a lot more grab than what you have here. So similar to the grip panels, right? You get some, it's kind of almost too smooth to me. It's the same thing you see on the checkering here all over, right? It does look great though. So, okay, now if you go to the weight, the spec sheet on the SAR 724 says the sport would weigh 39.8 ounces without a magazine, I guess. So with a magazine would be probably like 2.5 ounces heavier than that. So I would say they're talking about 42.5 ounces, almost 43 ounces with a magazine. What I weighted here in my scale was about 1 ounce less. So 37.5 without magazine and 41 with the magazine. So that's also more aligned to the weight of a Tanfolio. Tanfolio is about, I think, 43 with a magazine, or 44 with a magazine. And a Shadow2 is more like 46 with a magazine, or 43 without it. So kind of the weight also follows that same, more similar to a Tanfo than a Shadow2. Here's one thing I noticed too. The front of the slide here in the SAR is very bulky. There's a lot more meat here than you would see in a Shadow2 or a Tanfo, or at least it's a different shape. Let's get a Shadow2 here for you to take a look. See how the Shadow2 is narrower at the end? All right, why I'm saying this? Because this creates at least one incompatibility with this, which is holsters. So if you're thinking about getting one of these guns as a backup for competition, to your Shadow 2 or to your Tanfolio. This is important because it will not fit your holster. If your holster is for a Shadow 2, here's a Kydex holster for a Shadow 2, a good quality one, right? It just won't go in. It goes up to this point with the trigger guard still exposed. I can force it in, but then it's going to be really hard to take it out. So this is as much as it goes in a Kydex enclosed holster. If I look into another quality of holster here, this is the Hydra P from Ghost, one of the most popular holsters out there. Same situation. It doesn't even go in, actually. Doesn't even go. Right? It won't work. So now the other thing is that, well, I'm shooting limited optics, or I'm shooting a division that allows me to use one of those race holsters. So I noticed the trigger guard is the very same shape as a Shadow 2 or a Tanfolio. So I had hopes that this would fit on one of those race holsters that grabs better trigger guard, but here's what happens. It doesn't. That's another one. This is for Shadow 2 or TS2. They are both the same. It doesn't go in either. It's too wide. So shape is the same, format is the same, but I bet if I measure this area here, it's wider than a Shadow 2. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is not really, it doesn't make too much of a difference in the gun itself, but it's important for those thinking about competition. And since this sport is more kind of a competition oriented, if you're doing this in a hope to use as a backup or even your main gun, and if you already have the Shadow 2 or Tanfolio holster, you're going to need to get a new holster just for the SAR. All right, now let's measure trigger weight. See how the trigger, well, I'll tell you about the feel, how it feels. I already told you a little bit in the beginning, but yeah, it's pretty smooth, double action, a little bit in the heavy side, not bad at all. Actually, I'm going to be honest, I think it's more because of the trigger shoe than anything else. I simply dislike completely the trigger shoe that comes in a Tanfolio out of the box. It's too curvy for me. Some people love it, so this is more personal preference. Don't take that as I'm saying it's a bad trigger in any way. It is not. It's just personal preference. I do not like how curved the Tanfolio original trigger out of the box is on a double action. So this one, because it's more like a Shadow trigger, it's curved but not as much. I really like it. I like this double action trigger better than I like a Tanfolio double action trigger out of the box. And the single action is pretty good too. A little bit longer reset, some take up here. It breaks without much of a, like that rolling break that you see in a CZ. So this single action is actually pretty good. As good as you would get in a Shadow 2, in a well-tuned Shadow 2. A little bit heavy, can be improved for sure, but pretty good. Just not the reset. Reset is too long still. You can see me moving my hand here until I get the reset. And then there's a little bit of take up, no big deal. Very, very good trigger for this price range that this gun is available to you out there. So let's get to the measurements. Okay, now that I told you how the trigger feels, let's put some science behind it and tell you some numbers, trigger weight and whatnot. So let's get the weight of a double action. So just one note before we go here. I've seen this new tube all over the place. People measure, let me get the single action for instance as an example, it's easier. I've seen people measuring trigger weight like this. They get the trigger gauge in place and do this. Oh, look at this. It's a 13.8 ounce trigger. That's super light. Let's do it again. Look at that, 11.1 ounce. That's under 1 pound, a sub-pound trigger out of the box on a, basically a production gun. Yeah, no, that's because you're not measuring right. That's not how you measure the weight of the trigger. You have to rest the trigger gauge and pull it slowly until it breaks. You can't just pull fast. This is going to cut, a good amount of the weight, more than half of the weight, if you do that way. So let me do the proper way and show you the difference on a single action again. So this single action really measures about 3 pounds. 3 pounds, 3.2 ounces. I'll do it again just for consistency. £3, 5.5 ounces. See, pretty consistent. So that's what you want to do. You don't want to pull like really violently back the trigger. I know people argue, say, well, but that's not how you pull the trigger. You don't pull it slow like that. You're going to be in a competition. You're going to be shooting fast. You're going to be slapping the trigger all the time. I get that. But that's just perceived weight, right? You want to see the real weight of the trigger. That's what you want to do. Perceived weight is really, from a tuning and upgrading perspective, is useless. because it depends on how you pull. You want a weight that it does not depend on how you pull the trigger. So that's why you measure that way. So let's talk about, it's about 3 pounds and 4 ounces in single, and in double, what we have here, the other thing you should do is try to put the trigger gauge always in the same spot on the trigger shoe. So if I pull this in double, I got an 8 pounds, 9 ounces in the first pull. Like I said, it's a little bit on the heavy side. 7 pounds, 10.5 ounces in the second one. So I noticed that the trigger gauge slipped through the trigger shoe here a little bit to the end of the trigger pull, which makes it lighter. Okay, that's more like it. 8 pounds, 10.8 ounces. So let's put 8 pounds, 5 ounces. So that's about what you got here in double. So a little over 8 pounds in double, a little over 3 pounds in single. That's pretty decent, pretty good for an out of the box production gun. I did, since this gun was out of the box, brand new, never shot. Derek brought to me, still had the seal and everything on it. So I talked to him and asked his permission to go shoot some rounds in it, just to make sure that the gun was, one, working fine. Sometimes you get issues out of the box, so just to make sure it was working. And two, to have a feel on what would be really improved after we do anything to it. So I did shoot the gun a few times. Pretty fun to shoot. Did a few double taps. I put a dot on it, because if I was going to do any comparison in that video, I didn't end up not doing it, but if I was going to do any comparison to a Tanfo or a CZ or a Shadow2, both my guns, Tanfo and CZ, have a dot on it. So, for making things equal, I put a dot on the SAR as well, and shot a few rounds on target, did a few transitions. It worked. It's pretty fun to shoot. Love shooting it. It does feel more like a Tanfo than anything else. So, which for some of you will be like, this is awesome. That's what I want, right? For some others, like, well, I like more of a Shadow2 feel. So they do feel different. They do feel slightly different from each other. Tanfo seems to be a slightly better balanced gun. Shadow2 is a little bit heavier at the end. Some people like that. Some people don't, but that's how it feels. So I'm gonna open this now and start kind of looking at. We'll do our discovery phase here. Start taking things apart and find out what could be compatible with what, and what parts we're gonna plan to order to do, if anything, to do anything to it. All right, let's start the process of disassembling the SAR 724 Sport. So first thing we're gonna do is take these grips off. So you got a T20 Torx. By the way, same one you use for a Shadow2. I think on a Tanfo this comes as a T15 Torx screw. Take the grip panel off. Right out of the gate, you see some similarities again with the Tanfo here. So this is basically a Tanfo clone, which is based on CZ75 too. So they're all kind of let's say, relative. They're all cousins. So this is different on a Tanfo and a Shadow2. Like you see that the back strap here of the grip is kind of not quite solid, but yeah, there's a lot of steel here covering all the way to this point where this is going to be hollow here, and that's where your mainspring for the hammer goes. So it's a shorter mainspring, this much of a housing here in the trigger, in the back strap of the grip only, and then you have this whole part of here of kind of a more mass on it, and this is one of the reasons why the Tanfo is a little bit better balanced than the Shadow2. The Shadow2, this is all hollow because your mainspring uses all this area. I got a Shadow2 mainspring here, and as soon as I take this off, I can compare to show you the size of it. It's much longer, and it basically fits the whole length of the grip here, versus a Tanfo, which is just much shorter, maybe half or less than half of the size, and it goes just up into this area here. So I'm going to take the other grip panel off. And you can tell these grips are KSD grips, and there is a part number here in case you need to order more. I guess I didn't check on that. One note on this, like while we were checking, I was checking with Eric about about compatibility on parts, and we were we asked a few vendors out there who sell uh, parts for Tanfolio. We didn't find anybody sending parts for this yet. It's brand new release gun, and I don't know if there will be ever some aftermarket support specific for this, since it's so close to a Tanfolio. But we didn't get a positive answer for any of the vendors saying yes, you can get a frying pan or a hammer or a sear from a Tanfo and it will feed your SAR directly. We don't know that yet. Sarsilmaz, Derek contacted them and they confirmed the parts should be compatible. So that's what I'm seeing here, what it looks like so far. So I'm gonna get the next thing, I'm gonna get a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench. Loose this set screw here in the side of the oh, there's both sides. Interesting. That's different than a CZ. CZ is just one side. You got set screws on both sides for the magwell. And yeah, it gets loose and it slides right out. Get your magwell out. All right. I'm going to get the slide off the frame at this time. And I'm going to play with the disassemble the slide first. So you got pretty similar, not exactly the same as a guide rod for a Tanfo. This is one of those springs, not really like a regular round spring. Forgot how they call this, but that's what you got for in terms of recoil spring. Straight barrel, so that's 4.5 inch straight barrel, pretty similar to a Shadow2 or Tanfolio 1. Yeah, the cuts, the round, locking lugs here, everything pretty similar to what you've seen in Tanfolio actually. So here we got this. I'm not going to take it out. I'm going to take the extractor out, but it will be the same system. You'll need to take your plate for the optic out. Then you would expose a pin that you have here, roll pin, same roll pin you see from underneath here. And you just push this roll pin out and your extractor comes off, and there's a spring that keeps the tension extractor right here that would come out as well. But I'm going to take the firing pin plate out and the firing pin block and the firing pin out because I want to check this. Firing pin plate out, the same system as a Tanfolio and a Shadow2. You just press the firing pin in, push sideways, keep your finger there so it doesn't fly away, and pull the firing pin plate out. I keep my finger here because the firing pin block is there and it could be keeping tension on the firing pin. So I don't want this to just suddenly just fly out. I don't even know exactly how this firing pin looks like yet, but here's the firing pin plate, pretty similar to what you see in the Shadow2 and the Tanfolio. And then as I hold my finger here, I'm going to just manipulate this firing pin block. Yeah, and the firing pin comes out. So the firing pin and the firing pin spring, very similar design to a Tanfolio again. Nothing like a Shadow2. I mean, Shadow2 is the same system, but the spring is a shorter, thicker spring as opposed to this long, like 1911 style spring, long and thinner. And then the firing pin, yeah, pretty much the same. The firing pin on the Shadow2 is a little bit less beefy than this. This has a little bit more mass here at the end than you would see in the Shadow2. And the Shadow2 also obviously does not need this notch. This is for the firing pin block. Shadow2 doesn't have a firing pin block, so good deal. Firing pin is out. Looks like could be compatible. That's pretty similar to a firing pin on a Tanfolio. The only difference I see here, really, I have to check on a firing pin on a Tanfolio, but this is kind of chamfered. It's flattened this side here instead of being round with just the notch for the firing pin block. It is flat on your one side here, which you'd see in a Tanfolio too, but there's a second kind of a material taken off here, relief here on this side. This makes me wonder whether or not it's going to be compatible. One of the things I want it to be compatible, because if I'm going to relieve springs here and make this lighter, to make this trigger lighter, I want to have an extended firing pin to make sure the gun, to make sure it remains reliable and not start getting light strikes. So this is a firing pin block. If I pull this, it will come up with the little tiny spring on it. So put this there, and that's all I'm going to do in this slide. In terms of things that we might want to change, plan to change on this, that's all I need to know. Put the slide aside. Let's look at the frame. All right, got the frame here. I'm going to take the weight off the hammer, the tension off the hammer, and then the first thing we're gonna do is lift that sear spring. You see, there's a sear spring. One of the legs of the sear spring is right here. I'm going to lift it out so it lets the safety rod move to my left side here. So that's, by the way, same system on the Shadow2 and the Tanfo. So just move it out of the way, and then I'm going to be able to push. Everything is the same. Yeah, there you go. Safety comes off. Pretty much the same design as the Tanfolio safety. Here's one of the differences between the Tanfolio safety and the Shadow2. The Tanfolio has this spring-loaded pin here. Kind of what makes the Shadow2 has this same system, but it's on the frame as opposed to be on the safety. So Shadow2 has a detent with the spring that does that click, right? That keeps that tension on the positive tension on your safety. On the Tanfolio, this is rather in the safety lever itself with this plunge and spring-loaded plunge here. Get it out. That's a sear housing. That has a sear spring and your ejector or sear housing with the sear pin in the middle. So pretty identical, similar, very close, similar to a Tanfolio. Here's one difference I can tell. This area here, Tanfolio is a little longer. There's a little bit more mass in Tanfolio here. So I'm not sure that the sear house of a Tanfolio would fit this gun. The safety seems to be the sear seems to be exactly the same. Not sure either. That I don't think we're gonna know, because I don't think I'm gonna plan. The engagement between the sear and the hammer in this gun is pretty good. I don't think we need to change anything here or do anything here to improve. So I probably won't mess with this sear at all. So I might not know at the end whether or not the sears are compatible. Okay, next thing we're gonna do here is take the hammer off. So one difference on a Tanfolio, Shadow2, and this gun. This gun is unique in that sense. This gun uses a roll pin to secure the hammer in place. That's different than the Tanfo and the Shadow2. They both use a solid pin with a recessed area here. So the larger side of the pin is in this side. So the pin can only come out from the right to the left, never to the right, because of this recessed bigger area. So it's like the pin has one end bigger than the other. So it goes only in one direction. And then both in the Tanfolio and the Shadow2, there's a counter pin, a pin that comes from the top and goes against that, so it doesn't let the hammer pin go out in the only direction that could go. So it's a very tiny pin that go on top. You would see it right here in this area here on the Shadow2 and the Tanfolio. This one doesn't do that because it uses a roll pin. Do I like that? Not really. And the reason I don't like that much is because, well, if this is a competition-oriented gun, this roll pin makes things a little bit harder to play with. Like the solid pin with the recessed area here is so easy to remove, replace, like do things with the hammer, put it back. All that thing is a much easier operation than this is going to be with this roll pin. This roll pin, to take it out and put it in, it's going to be a little bit more work. You need to hammer in and out. And also, as a roll pin, this is going to wear out as you put it in and out. It's going to get, kind of a compressed and maybe start being loose here, which you don't want. There's really nothing keep this pin in place but pressure. That's one noticeable difference here. All right, now that we know that difference, let's take that pin out and take the hammer off. So get this in a block. This is my favorite piece of 2x4 here. I'm going to get a roll pin punch. 3/32 seems to be too small. Let's see if this is the right one. Yeah, I think it's more like a 1/8 roll pin punch. Get it there. And it's off. Get the roll pin out. Now I'm going to hold the hammer and pull my punch out. The hammer is under tension. If I don't do that, it's going to fly out. And God knows where that spring is going to go. So I'm going to take it out like this carefully. Get the pin punch out. And then I got the hammer. Yeah, just like I suspected, this is pretty much a Tanfolio system here. with, again, roll pins everywhere. On a Shadow 2, this would be the same system as well, pretty similar, with a disconnector. In a Tanfo world, this is called interrupter, and 2 pins, one holding the hammer strut, one holding the interrupter disconnected to the hammer. These are roll pins, just like you would see in a Tanfo. In a Shadow 2, they would be solid pins. And then you get a hammer strut that is really short compared to a Shadow 2 hammer strut, which is more like this long. And it's because of the, like I said, the mainspring on a Shadow 2 is much longer. And here's our mainspring. Let me get a Shadow 2 mainspring so you'll see the difference here. So here's what a Shadow 2 mainspring looks like. Quite different. Not even half of it. It's more like almost a third of the length. Shadow 2, SAR Tanfo. Okay, I do not know the weight, the original weight of this, but with that 8 pounds double action trigger, I'm gonna guess this is quite heavy, and we could have a much lighter spring here. And as long as we have as long as we can make sure that, confirm that extended frying pin would work, we should be okay. And just by doing that, we're gonna have a lighter, not necessarily smoother, not shorter for sure, but a lighter double action pull. All right, next, what we're gonna do is take the trigger out. Okay, to take the trigger out, again, another roll pin here, and that's all that is holding the trigger. So we're gonna put that in the block. Get another, this time, so I used the 1/8 roll pin punch. Now I'm gonna use the 3/32 roll pin punch. Here's one thing I want to do as a precaution here. I don't know how hard this pin's gonna be to come out. So there is that trigger return spring that is the same design as the Shadow 2 and Tanfo. It's gonna fly out. If by chance this pin goes halfway through and my punch slips out, this spring is gonna fly and it's gonna go to a black hole that nobody's gonna ever find again. So I'm put that here, make sure if it won't fly, just in case. And I'm gonna put punch pin there, a roll pin punch. Hold this in my hand maybe. And here's my roll pin. That's trigger pin. Interesting enough, it's pretty short compared to a Shadow 2. The original pin in the Shadow 2 here is also a roll pin. Thinner, but also a roll pin. That's a Shadow 2 pin. That's a SAR pin. The SAR is thicker and shorter than a Shadow 2. So there are, step by step, we're seeing some important differences between the Shadow 2 and this gun from an architecture and design perspective. Kind of the same architecture, same design, but the parts are different. So there's not many interchangeable parts. The only one that I could confirm so far, and I didn't mention that yet, but the slide stop. The slide stop is the same across Tanfo, Shadow 2. They kind of work. At least the guns that I have, the Shadow 2, the Stock 2, and this SAR 724, the slide stop work. The same slide stop work across all of them. All right, now that I got that, I'm gonna keep that clip on the trigger return spring. Got my hand on top just in case, and take my punch off. There we go. That's the spring that we don't want to see flying anywhere. Same exact design as a Shadow 2 or Tanfo. So we should be able to use one of those relief springs here. That's going to be another thing that's going to add, or rather remove, weight from the trigger, make it lighter in double and single, or so in double. And as the trigger bar comes off, pretty identical design as the trigger bar off a Tanfo. Shadow 2 is about the same design too. It's just that these edges here are a little bit different shape than this. Another difference is you don't see on a Shadow 2 you would have rails here inside, because these rails is where your trigger bar spring rides. In this case, you don't have a trigger bar spring, you have a trigger bar guide. Speaking of which, let's take it out of the gun. Trigger bar guide comes off. It's that's another thing you have to notice too. This is the mag release, right? The mag release button. You can tell this is a Tanfo system. It has a little hole. It's similar, well, not exactly the same, but similar. Let's say 1911-ish, because it has a spring, a horizontal spring here, that keeps a plunge inside under tension and caught by the trigger bar guide, by this thing here that comes vertically perpendicular on top. 1911 is not like that. I mean, the only similarity here really 1911 is that it has that plunge, that spring-loaded plunge. 1911 has the rail here that will keep, and that plunge has this kind of an edge that goes into the rail and lock this in place. So not really a trigger bar guide or anything, completely different design, but that's a lot more similar than a Shadow2. Shadow2, it's not like that. It doesn't have any kind of a spring-loaded inside that is part of the mag catch itself. It's more like a, actually I have the spring here. I'm going to catch and show you. Let me pick it up and show you out. Okay, now Shadow2, your mag catch is going to be, the tension of the mag catch is determined by, and is also what keeps it in place, by a spring like this. This spring goes on top, the mag catch kind of goes perpendicular to it, and then there's another spring here, that's a trigger bar spring on a Shadow2 that kind of go concentric with that magazine catch spring like this. And then there's a screw that comes on top between both of them, and it's screwed in the frame. It's fixed in the frame that keeps everything together. This trigger bar spring, that's a Shadow2 trigger bar. As you can see, like if I compare with even the weight is very different. That's much lighter than the Shadow2. Shadow2 is a little thicker, but kind of you can tell, similar system here, but it has these rails underneath that I told you about it. These rails is because this is going to ride the spring, the trigger bar spring rides right underneath, like so, on those rails here, and is what makes the trigger bar wants to go up, and the slide is what prevents it to go, if that makes sense. Okay, to take the trigger bar guide out, you're going to need a very thin punch. I'm going to use a straight pick here to go into this hole and just keep it there. There's nothing for you to push against. Right now there's a perpendicular pin or rod that is going through, that comes from the trigger bar guide right here, that is keeping everything in place. Behind that rod, where you cannot access from here yet, there is a plunge, and that plunge is compressed with the spring. So if you don't put anything here and you just pull the guide rod, the trigger bar guide out, that plunge is going to fly. That plunge is a very, very small thing. I'm going to show you. And if it flies away, it's one of those things, right? It's going to go in a black hole. You're not going to find it. And I don't know if this is the same design as a Tanfolio, so you probably need to order another one from Sarsilmaz if you lose it. So I'm going to keep it there. Hold it with your left hand, and then you grab a nose plier. You grab the trigger bar guide and push up. That's how it should be. Chop slowly. There we go. Now you can push the mag catch. There you go. That's a very similar system as a Tanfolio. So if I get that plunge out to show you what I'm talking about, why I was really afraid of this flying, it's actually not the same as a Tanfolio, pretty close, but you can tell how small this is, and a very tiny spring here behind it. So this goes here, and you can say it's crossing here now, but as you push, when you put it back on place, you need to push it in, compress it. It opens a gap here for the trigger bar guide, for the end of the trigger bar guide. This end here gets there, and then you let go, and it keeps under tension, and that keeps everything in place. It prevents the trigger bar guide to go out, and also prevents the mag catch to move beyond what it needs to move just to release magazines. So let's talk about the trigger bar guide. That's exactly the same design as a Tanfo. I actually do believe that if you get a trigger bar guide, one of those extreme trigger bar guide that you can find out there aftermarket, it should work just fine. It does look like extremely similar, if not exactly the same as a Tanfolio. Okay, with that, we kind of disassembled pretty much everything. If you want, there's one more thing. If you want to disassemble every single part of it, which I'm not interested in doing it because I'm just thinking about what to do to improve this gun later on, but you also have a slide stop spring right here. To take that off, there is the same system as the Shadow2. There's a pin here. You push that pin in and the spring comes off. So pretty easy to remove. I don't want to do that. I don't need it. That's probably one of those parts that will never wear out and you never need to remove. Unless you're going to do something, you know, like a deep clean the gun, you want to clean that area as well, or some Cerakote job or anything like that, you need to remove this. But other than that, you should never need to remove that part. This is all out. So let's start looking at, we looked at the parts. Here's what I think we can do that will work and will give this gun a much better trigger. It's mainspring. I can get a lighter mainspring. I'm not touching the hammer or the hammer strut. I think that's totally fine. Maybe, and that's something I got the parts already, and that's something I got the parts with the condition that if they work, obviously if the interrupter, I'm going to try an aftermarket interrupter, and that's just to reduce that take up on the single action. I won't fit it, otherwise I can't return it if it doesn't work. I'll just put it in the gun and check, see that will give me a good feeling if I can make it work or not. But I don't know for sure yet, but it's something to consider. An interrupter, a mainspring for the hammer. What else I'm thinking here? A sear spring for the sear. I can get one of those extreme relief sear spring that's going to give a little bit lighter single action pull. A trigger return spring. And one thing I can do here too, I'm going to put that in the plan. Well, the extended firing pin, you need to make sure that can be done. Otherwise, the mainspring here can't really go much lighter than that, much lighter than what you have in OEM, without compromising reliability. If that works, then great. I can use a lighter mainspring, and that's going to be critical to make sure this trigger gets really better. The other thing I can do here is a modification on this trigger, but I can actually add, and I have that in a video somewhere. I think I posted that on the video already. Like we can drill and tap this trigger shoe in the middle here and put a set screw, an M3 set screw that goes across to limit how much the trigger goes back after it breaks, after the hammer breaks. So that gives you a better feel in the trigger, but also a shorter reset. Most importantly, a shorter reset by doing that. So that's something to consider as well. So that's the plan. I'm going to work on this gun, not in this video like I said in the beginning, and I may put a different video together to talk about the results, how it feels, what's better, what's not, the weight of the trigger, what was the gain that we got it, which parts made the biggest difference, and whatnot. Maybe that's going to come up in a different video. But for now, this is all that I wanted to show you, and I hope this has been good and informative to you. Overall, I really like this gun. It's a really good gun for the price range. It is right there with the Shadow2 and a Tanfo. Shadow2 Tanfo a little bit more expensive, but also you see a little bit, some parts and some things that are a little bit different quality than this one, but it does shoot well, does work. I'll definitely use this in competition if I had the holster and the gear for it. So thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed, and see you in the next video.